Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's basketball webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune basketball beat writer Steve Walentik. Steve, Missouri coming off a pretty tough three-game stretch where they lose to Georgetown in overtime and they beat Oregon on the road, beat Vanderbilt at home in overtime. Maybe the one common thread in those games is Missouri's defense has been a little shaky. Just your thoughts on what are the causes of that and maybe if there are solutions or if it's a fixable problem.
I think there are several problems. Number one, we haven't seen Missouri's full court press be as effective either at creating turnovers or just simply disrupting opponents from getting into their offense. So I think more and more teams we've seen are exploiting that and getting easy baskets before Missouri has a chance to get back and set its defense. In half-court situations, I think the Tigers have really struggled on the ball, keeping opposing guards out of the paint, and that's leading to breakdowns where they're either getting easy baskets right at the rim because guys aren't rotating over quickly enough, or they're setting up teammates for open shots at the three-point line. Missouri's opponents right now are shooting 38% from three-point range, which is, I think, 10th best or 10th worst, I should say, in the Big 12 conference right now. Just as a reference point, and they've got to do a better job of closing out on some of those shooters. Mike Anderson has said that they need to have more pride in their defense. It is something that just is about pure effort, and I don't think we've seen them invested in it as much as previous teams to this point.
Although I would say against Georgetown, that was really an effort game on both sides, and still pretty bad defense, I thought. I mean, it was not that they weren't trying. It seemed like they just, A, they couldn't stay in front of anybody, and B, maybe that was leading to the open three-pointers. I guess I didn't think it was so much of an effort problem as they're not very good defenders.
Well, there's no question that they missed some of the guys that they had last year and previous years defensively, particularly on the ball. When you talk about J.T. Tiller and Zaire Taylor, those guys were really good at fighting through screens and keeping their man in front of them, preventing guards from getting into the paint easily and getting easy opportunities. When they aren't doing as good a job at the point of attack, other things start to break down, and you're not seeing the cohesiveness to cover up for some of those mistakes.
One thing that has emerged on the positive side recently is Marcus Denmon, I think, has really become Missouri's go-to player. He was fantastic against Georgetown, kind of an inspirational effort against Vanderbilt in the second half where he made the big plays down the stretch after he had recently learned about his cousin being shot and killed. Do you see their offense starting to tilt more towards him, maybe the other players recognizing, this maybe is our best player and let's make sure he's getting all the shots he needs to get?
Well, yes and no. I think one of the things that's made Marcus so effective is that he's doing things within the flow of the offense. He's not hunting his shot. He's not forcing the action. He's getting opportunities and he's taking advantage of them. I think that's what this team needs to continue to happen. I do think that Marcus is going to continue to be a bigger part of the offense just because he's able to exploit the opportunities that are presented to him. He's able to score more ways. He's obviously playing with a lot of confidence. He's not just getting the ball on the wing and if he's open, taking a jump shot. If a guy's coming out at him, he's able to drive around him now. He's done a better job of getting to the basket, getting to the free throw line, making plays in a lot of different ways, which has made him a lot harder to guard. And I expect that to continue. I don't know if he's going to keep shooting 51% from three-point range all season, but clearly I think he's playing at a different level confidence-wise than we have seen the first two seasons, and there's no reason to think he's not going to keep that up.
Yeah, I think if you're a guard, if your best offensive player is a guard, they're going to touch the ball enough you don't have to make any special allowances for him. I think if it was Lawrence Bowers was the guy you really were wanting to get involved and he wasn't touching the ball enough, that's a different story. But, yeah, I think, and he's not so much better than some of these other guys that it would surprise you if, say, against Illinois, if it was Bowers or if it were English or Dixon who led them in scoring. It's fairly close. It's not like, say, a few years ago when Thomas Gardner was the only guy who could remotely shoot the ball. So I think it's all right. The only time I think where you might want to run special stuff for him would be end of game or end of half situations where you got one possession and you want him to be the guy taking the shot.
Yeah, and I clearly think Mike Anderson's going to instruct his guys in those kind of situations to get the ball to Marcus because of all the guys they have, I think he can beat you in the most ways right now. He's clearly this team's best perimeter shooter, but I think he's much more versatile right now as a scorer than anybody else they have.
Yeah, whereas Zaire Taylor was the guy the last couple of years you want to take the last shot. I think he is the guy. Noticed an interesting trend this year too in the games against overmatched opponents. Missouri, Anderson is continuing to play all his guys, but in the tight games, he's really shortening the bench, sometimes to as few as 6 guys. And guys who play some in the blowouts, like Ricky Krecklow, Steve Moore, even Phil Pressey, just tend to spend the whole second half sitting on the bench. What do you think about that? Is that something we're going to see the rest of the year? Is it good?
Well, I think it's, Mike would say it's happened. He's done it out of necessity to this point, and I think it's hard to argue with him right now, just because I'm not sure you see Missouri coming back from an 18-point deficit against Georgetown if it's not relying on some of those more veteran guys who've been there and have shown they can make plays. Same thing against Vanderbilt. That game was back and forth almost the whole way. Neither team led by more than 6 points for the last 37 minutes, and you can't afford to give away possessions in games like that. I think he's struggling with right now when he has Phil Pressey in the game. He's had some turnovers that are inexcusable. His shot selection has not been great, and that can hurt you. That can lead to stalls on offense. And I think Ricky Krecklow's made some of those mistakes. He's also not physically probably ready from a strength standpoint to deal with a team like Georgetown that has some bigger veteran guards. So he hasn't felt comfortable with them in those situations. I think going forward, that's going to have to change because Mike Anderson's whole philosophy is built on wearing people down. It's really tough to wear people down when they're playing more people than you are, and we haven't seen this team be as good in the last 10 minutes of games where they put together that big ending run that gets them victories, because the other teams are just as fresh as they are going into those final stretches.
Yeah, that would be my point. I think the advantage Missouri has over other teams is its commitment to its system, which other teams nobody else plays this way, really. And so I think you're sort of forfeiting that advantage and just becoming another regular team when you're just playing 6 guys and they're all tired for about the entire second half. So now your press isn't going to work. So now you are going to have to play half-court defense.
And there's no way your defensive intensity can be at the level that he wants when you are only playing.
So you need those guys in the game to come back. But then I think you just have to trust. I don't think Ricky Krecklo's done a bad job. I think Phil Pressey has got some shot selection issues, but I think he's defensively. I think he can be pretty good, and I think both sides of the ball look pretty good against Presbyterian. Granted, Presbyterian, but I think you stick with those guys. So when Big 12 play does roll around, then you've got a 10-man rotation. If you remember back the year they were playing Connecticut for a shot at the Final Four, when it came right down to it, the guys on the floor in the second half were like Justin Stafford, DeMar Carroll and Leo Lyons were on the bench. That's how much he trusted those guys, and that was their best team.
Well, that's why I think
he's got to trust them. But I think you also have to. They have to earn it, I suppose, but I think you also have to trust them as a coach to say, well, try and fail and try again.
No doubt. And we don't know what he sees in practice every day from those guys. I do think that's why this next stretch of games going up to Big 12 play is so important, is because he does have to develop a level of trust in those guys by the time he gets to Colorado on January 8th, start of Big 12 play, just because they are going to need to be able to play their system to succeed in what looks like a pretty good league right now with 6 teams now in the rank, top 25.
Lastly, coming into the season, I think we were all wondering if Ricardo Ratliffe might be kind of the missing piece. This team has needed an inside guy who wants to be inside. Just after 9 games, your thoughts? Has he turned out to be that piece that they were needing?
Well, I think you can definitely argue yes. He's averaging 12 points and 8 rebounds right now, or real close to that. He's been every bit as good as I thought he would be. He runs the floor. He rebounds offensively. He does score inside. He had his best games in arguably Missouri's 2 biggest games against Georgetown and against Vanderbilt. I thought he was really good in both those games, making plays throughout and in pressure situations. there really hasn't been anything that he hasn't done that you would have, been expecting at this point. Mm-hmm. I think obviously he needs to get better defensively. He's only blocked 7 shots on the season right now. You'd like to see more of those. You'd like to see he's one of those guys that needs to get better with rotations on defense, closing in on shooters when Missouri's scrambling around. But I think he's been every bit as good as advertised.
Yeah, he's helped. I mean, I think he's maybe, if you thought he was going to be some supremely athletic guy, that's really not what he is. I mean, he struggles to dunk sometimes. He gets shots blocked. He really isn't a shot blocker himself. But he rebounds, and he'll give you, I think he'll give you 10 points and maybe 6 or 7 rebounds a game. So I think that's probably what a reasonable person would have expected going in. To call it a missing piece, I would think you would have to see that the puzzle is now complete, which it really hasn't been. I still just feel like something's sort of missing from the way this team is playing. I don't think maybe it's not that unusual. I mean, maybe they find it as the year goes on, but just hasn't been quite right yet. I mean, through the first 9 games, in my opinion, they haven't looked like a top 15 team to me.
I mean, the big difference obviously goes back to defense, and the other thing is, I think rather than looking at a guy like Ratliff, you look at veteran guys like Lawrence Bowers and Kim English who haven't really broken out yet. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I think Missouri was counting on more from both those guys based on what they did last season and going on into the preseason this year.
All right, and now we move on to our abrupt ending. As usual, I want to thank Garrick Parmalee, who you never see on these things, but is our photo director and is leaving for a job in the outside world. So thanks to Garrick for doing these webcasts, and we'll have to find someone else. And also, if you've seen a table, you could use that too. You could walk our table. So join us again, whenever it might be, as we try to find what we've been